All right, so let's get started. Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent Tran. I'm co-founder of Liongard, and we're so excited to have you here. We're partnered with Empath and the Dell Expert Network in putting together this webinar on a topic that's near and dear to us, which is change management. And it's great to see you all here and appreciate that you can share that you share the importance of this topic and have taken time out of your day to learn more about it. So it's really great. So the webinar is here's the what, why, and how to success of change management. Check if you're on the right, right webinar. I'm sure you signed up for many webinars, but it's glad to see everybody here. So at Liongard, one of our core values is teach and lead. And we thought that it would be best to bring in the powerhouse team at Empath to share their knowledge with the community. And it's not just all coming from us, but we want to make sure that the ecosystem is also contributing to the education of our partners and friends. You might wonder why, Liongard lions and Empath elephants get along, but in the cybersecurity safari, as Wes put it, we have to work together to move us forward and keep us safe. So in this webinar, Empath's co-founder, Wes Spencer, and Alex Farling will cover the essentials of change management, developing a process for MSPs if you don't have one already. Sometimes change management is left out. It's either underdeveloped or difficult to enforce specifically at an MSP. And so we'll walk through those things. And especially from change management as a cybersecurity control to ensure that you keep your MSP as well as your customers safe. They'll cover all those processes, and also we'll be sharing the recording as I mentioned with anybody who couldn't make it. We encourage that you all share it with your teammates as well. So this is very much a how-to, a beginner's guide to go through that. So a quick note about Liongard. We started the company based on the simple question of tell me what changed. So like I said, this is near and dear to us, and alerting on those changes is what enables our MSP partners to be ahead of the issues that might occur. They have we started with automating system documentation, so they have an asset inventory they can start with. They can understand what their secure configuration, security posture looks like, and they have continuous monitoring of the drift and configurations, as you can see across that timeline in that screenshot there. So that is at the heart of our configuration change detection and response platform, is the concept of change. And please reach out to us if you're interested in learning more, and we'll be glad to give you all a demo and walk through those as well. So on the next slide, I just want to go through some quick housekeeping items. Feel free to drop in questions in the Q&A section, and Alex and Wes will address them at the end or try to fold them in as we see them come across. Also, we've opened up the chat. We really want to see y'all participate and be a part of the conversation and keep them on their toes. So whatever's coming in, we want to see participation and interaction as well. So also we'd like you to stay at the very end. We'll go through, and Laura will introduce or talk about the Dell Expert Network, who and Dell has graciously sponsored this event and the drawing that you see in the post that we have. So after the event, we will do the drawing. We'll notify the attendee as to who won and reach out to you over email. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speakers and our serial entrepreneurs for today. So on the next slide, we've got Laura. Well, I think you guys know me. You got Laura Ball she's a business development manager with the Dell Expert Network, and currently, prior to her current position, she was an account manager at Dell. She's handled over 150 accounts. Her goal is to make sure that her customers are always driving business and growing. So Laura will be sharing more with us on the benefits of the Dell Expert Network after the webinar. We have Alex Farling, who is the co-founder of Empath, and not Wes Spencer. If you see them around the shows, he's co-founder of Empath, co-founder of Lifecycle Insights that exited in 2023. He's got 20 years plus in the MSP industry. I'm not going to make a joke about his hair. And then you can
had a full head of hair when we started this journey, just saying.
His expertise in VCIO and account management optimization, very important stuff. And more importantly, he's a huge advisor and an angel investor in the ecosystem. And then we also have Wes Spencer, a co-founder of Empath as well. He comes from a background in banking and education. He exited Perch Security. Y'all might have heard of that in 2020, and with 55 FTEs, and was headquartered in Tampa, Florida. It was a nice 10x exit that we can tell from the bullets there. You can also spot him like at shows. You're not wearing your Wes Spencer shirt, but if he does, you can spot him a mile away there. Awesome. And with that, I'll hand it over to our speakers, Wes and Alex. Take it away.
Fantastic. Thanks, everyone. And yeah, for the record, Alex played a very mean joke on me. I have a T-shirt that has my name on it. I had this brilliant idea like 3 years ago that I would just have my name on it. I'd use it for my bio, and so I wore it once. And my wife said, "If you ever wear that shirt again, I'll kill you." So I've never worn it again. But I forget that it's on my bio all the time, and so people associate me with the shirt. And I don't though, because I've never worn it ever since. And Alex made a very nasty joke the other day at a conference and got like 70 shirts made that said not Wes Spencer on them, and everyone wore them. And I was more than a little embarrassed, so I'll never forgive you for that, Alex. But thank you for joining. We're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about change management. I would love to know, before we get started in chat, or we get started in content, I want you to rate yourself and rate your organization in change management. One being, we have never done it. We don't know anything about it. That's why we're here. To 5, like we really, like if we were to go under an audit process for a SOC 2, we would be flying colors. Give me a rating, 1 to 5. 1 is terrible. 5 is pretty much the best there is. And it is okay to be 1s. It's okay to be 2s. I've discovered most people in this world, that's kind of where we're at. And I will say this, literally nobody is good at change management out of the box. Nobody, except for Joe. But Joe is the one and only. We all know who Joe is. Liongard wouldn't be around if it were not for that brilliant man. But most of the rest of us, this is not something we're good at. We have to be taught how to be good with this. And we also have to be educated on why the heck this matters. Because the knee jerk that most people have with change management is, that's for big orgs to do. That's boring. There's no need for it. I don't have to worry about it. And we want to dispel all of that, and we want to give you some practical takeaways. Okay, so keep in mind today I have to apologize to you because this is a very wordy slide deck. Normally, I'm very well known for speaking only in images, but man, when you talk about change management, there's just a lot to cover. So this is a recorded session. You can have the slides later. You can go watch this again. You can share this with your friends, but I'm sorry for it being so wordy. It just kind of has to be that way because of how much we're going to cover. So the first thing that we do want to cover is, what the heck is change management? For those of you that kind of gave a 1 or a 2, I want to cover that a little bit. And also I want to cover what Dory just said. So she said, speaking from my company prior to my exit, my region was a 4, which helped everyone keep their sanity and increase in sales. Awesome. And then Corey checking in with a 1 or 2. So most people have been in that 1 or 2 category. All right. So what is change management? Well, as we see here, it's designed to help the life cycle of changes to your organization. Here's the thing you got to recognize. Your organization is in constant flux and change, constantly. You have new people coming in, you have people leaving, you have new systems coming in, you have changes to systems nonstop, and you also have technology and strategy changes that are constantly happening. Every org is always in flux. I don't even care if you're an old school, we're just like a machine shop and we haven't changed our infrastructure in 4 years. I'm sorry, change management is still important. The other thing that I think is important for MSPs, and Alex, I'm going to come to you on this, is the fact that MSPs are juggling changes for all of their clients. So now you have a change management times in being the number of clients that you have, and this becomes very, very difficult. But ultimately, Alex, you're responsible for the IT and the IT strategy for your clients. So change management is something you inherit from all the clients you work with, which makes this doubly difficult. Am I right?
It does. And, one of the things that we do as MSPs is we fly by the seat of our pants a lot, right? And that creates that potential for kind of this next bullet that you're kind of talking about. You're like, humans are error prone, right? Like, we do dumb stuff, especially if we're tired, we're working long hours, we're exhausted, I tell a story about, and I told it on a LinkedIn post the other day, where I made a stupid mistake. I knew better. I even had a process in place to solve for it, and I just didn't do my own process, which caused me to go home late one night and, as penance, get up early in the morning and drive to a client office to power cycle a firewall and make sure they got back up and that I could make my change. So, we can make our own lives harder by not doing this, because we're trying to juggle, let's face it, we're professional plate spinners, and we have to spin plates for all of our different customers. And we're successful when we manage to at least put some egg crate foam on the ground, so when we drop a plate, nothing breaks, right? And that's what change management is, right? It's having a process for change and making sure we have a way to back out or change if we screw it up.
Yep, well said. Well said. Bob Miller checking in said he's sorry. He's like, if you guys would, when you chat with us, will you hit everyone? And the reason that's important is so we can all see what we're all talking and collaborating on. That way, if I call something out in chat or Alex does, we can all see what we're saying. So if you would hit everyone on chat. But good to see you, Bob Miller. I'm glad you joined us. Okay, so it's about controlling risk. It's about being the reality that humans are error prone. And also, I would even go so far as to say it's not only error prone, it's also the challenges that we get into as well around. Sometimes it has nothing to do with an error. It has everything to do with we made a change to a system that no longer is valid. Or we have what we call scope creep, where changes are too broad, or we haven't correctly assessed them. Or maybe someone changes roles in the organization, they still maintain access privileges to something they no longer need, which can become a huge problem down the road, right? So that's what change management is. So let's focus on what is a change, because the risk that we can get into at the very beginning of this is people say, well, that means we got to have a management process for every mouse click. No, no, we don't. There's certain things that are changes and certain things that are not changes, and we'll cover that. So here's this is the ITIL definition. If you don't know ITIL, they're just an organization that really teaches us IT process. And they explain it this way, that addition, modification, or removal of any unauthorized or unplanned support service or service, but it's a mouthful. That thing is a mouthful, right? So I kind of digested this into a bit of an easier understanding down below. It's an event that's been approved by an authority. It's been evaluated and implemented while minimizing risk and adds value to the business and customers. So I can give you examples of this, but as we cover this and dive deeper, it'll make more sense. I promise. It'll click more. It's things like we have hired a new employee in the organization. We need to grant them certain access privileges and controls. We have a server that we need to decommission because it's now out of its life cycle. We have a new SaaS application that we need to deploy and get running. These are all examples of changes that happen in the organization. And the goal of change management is not to stop those things. It's to make sure that we've assessed them before we actually implement the changes. Now, this brings up that question, like, why would I want to do that? Well, the reality is, for most of us, this is kind of change control for us in today's day and age. It's a dumpster fire. And I get it, right? As a small and growing MSP, you're like, look, I can handle this. I'm the one that makes the changes, and I'm the owner of the MSP. And so I can just handle this on my own, and I'm not a dummy, and I won't make mistakes. But the reality is, as we grow, that becomes a real problem. Alex, I'd love for you to given that this is your graphic, I'd love for you to elaborate on this even more.
No, I think it just goes back to, right, there's an issue at the MSP where we're doing too many things. We're trying to upskill young employees and keep everybody on the same page. And we tend to have a lot of processes that are not fully documented, fully flushed out. A lot of things get said, but not documented and maybe not followed to the letter. So everybody's not always rowing in the same direction. And sometimes one person is following that verbal change control policy. Somebody else is doing it a little different. And we just need to focus on how do we deliver this consistently across all of our customers and across all of our employees. And that comes to having a well-defined, well-documented change control process and maybe some tools that support it, because out of the box, our typical PSAs just don't solve this problem, right? They give us a place to create a ticket, to document that we're going to do some work, but they don't have a really good flow for change control. And I've heard some folks back into it and kind of force the tools to do it. But it's a struggle, and you definitely have to put the energy into making it work, or else you wind up with this, which I joke is an actual photo of my MSP in the middle of a change control process. But we want to make sure that we're a little better set up for this. We used to call it the controlled crash landing at my MSP, right? We do a big change, as long as everybody walks away, everything's okay. But we really want it to be that, not to be the joke, and for these things to go smoothly.
Love it. Thanks, Alex. And I want to pull Bob's quote out here. If you don't know Bob Miller from Global Data Systems out in Lafayette, great MSP, and Bob's just a great MSP leader. And I love what he says. So their change management process fairly elaborate: internal changes, customer changes, those that can affect our ability to provide service, those that are customer facing. Each has its own task list, notification list, review, and approval process, and defines internally the changes that can and cannot be done. So if you read Bob's quote, you're like, whoa, that sounds intricate. Well, it is. But I can promise you, Bob didn't create that overnight. That probably came from a year or two of hard work from Bob's organization to get there. And so what we want to do today is I want to give you the how do I get to where Bob's at? If I want to be at that level of maturity that Bob's at, how do I get there? And so let's start diving into that so we can get really practical. The first thing is I do want to cover the negative first. Why do we need this? We still haven't answered that question. Why is that important? Well, there's a whole bunch of reasons why change control is important, right? If we are not focusing on documenting and assessing changes before they happen, we're going to run ourselves into trouble. I find that organizations in the MSP space and outside of the MSP space, if they're not doing these things, how do you have any idea the impact that's going to happen to your organization if you willy-nilly flip something on or flip something off? How many incidents have been caused because we flip multi-factor off while we're debugging an authentication issue, and then we forget to turn it back on? This happened, right? Or in the middle of the pandemic, how many of us flipped remote desktop on because we didn't have mature remote desktop capabilities and our employees were screaming, I've got to work from home because we can't go in the office anymore. And then we saw breach after breach after breach because we hadn't assessed the impact of that change and thinking, oh, you know what? Bad guys could absolutely use compromised credentials and just log right into our entire infrastructure because remote desktop is open everywhere. So this is what I'm talking about, but it's also sprawl. As you grow and as your organization grows over time, this sprawl becomes a problem. It's like a room in your house. If you never clean it up, it gets worse and it gets worse and it gets worse. And before you know it, you're a hoarder and you can't clean it up. And you have no idea where to start. That's a problem too, right? We also give too much permissions out than we should. Change control helps us assess and say, you know what? This new user is accessing and requesting access to this platform for these roles, but we actually think from a needs-know perspective and minimum privilege, they only need this and this. So let's go and rethink this privilege. Let's rethink these changes. So that's important. But also, I'll just point to the Colonial Pipeline incident. Does anyone remember how that guy happened? That entire incident happened because they had a remote, like a virtual connection platform that was in, and it was decommissioned. It was out of its lifecycle management, and IT had it decommissioned from like their books, and accounting wrote it off, all this kind of stuff, but IT actually never pulled the plug from it. Uh-oh. What happened?
Well, and that goes to Bob's point. Well, that goes to Bob's point in chat. He said one reason if you have device inventories or routing maps, you can't keep those current if you don't track changes. So we have this issue where our documentation doesn't match what we do. And we saw that at the boot camp we ran last week when we had a bunch of folks down at the CyberFox headquarters, and we talked over inventories and how if you don't know what you're protecting, you can't protect it. And this is an exact example of inventory doesn't match reality. So we didn't protect something that was still in play.
Yep. Exactly. And so when you think about that,
I guess what I was going to say there just was that 100% of the MSPs in the room agreed their inventory didn't match reality, which I thought that was a telling number.
Yeah, it's a problem, right? And it's a problem across the board for us. And this is why change management is critical to help us track that, right? And so just to kind of close the loop on the Colonial Pipeline, they had a server open, and because they had never actually pulled the plug from it, a bad guy leveraged compromised credentials, got into their entire network from that server that was supposed to be decommissioned that they forgot about, and all hell broke loose from there. So yeah, it's definitely a problem. So what does this look like? Well, first of all, change management starts with knowledge. It starts with what we're going to arm you with today. You're not going to walk out of today's webinar saying, I am now doing change management. What you are going to walk out of today's webinar with is, now I know how to start it. So what we're doing is we're going to give you the roadmap. We're going to give you the what do you call the almanac, like the actual printed maps that people used to use before GPS. You know, you'd buy the Rand McNally's. We're going to give you the Rand McNally of how to do all this, but you're still going to have to walk through the steps yourself, okay? But keep in mind, you're actually well positioned to do this. MSPs are better at doing change management than a lot of other organizations because you're so process mature around ticketing And ticketing is really a big piece that drives the maturity of this. And we'll show you some examples. Atlas, thank you, Terry, and Atlas. So you millennials and down, trust me, in Atlas, before we had GPS, you actually had to like go print out a map and then pray that you didn't miss it. And if you missed it, now you're in real trouble. So yeah. All right, so here's the process for change management. This is it's kind of a 6-step process. You'll find other people sort of express this in maybe 5 steps, but this is the general kind of process. We're going to walk through each of these. So requesting a change, reviewing that request, evaluating the change, approving the change, implementing the change, and then a final kind of review step that happens at the end to say, was this all correct? And do we do this right? So this is the process for it. And in reality, there can be multiple people in the organization that are going to be doing this. You sort of have implementers and you have approvers, but you also have requesters. So you have to start thinking through all this. So let's work through this entire journey. Let's start with step 1, requesting the change, okay? So this is typically at the very beginning, and you need to think through who can actually request a change. You should have some policy that's been written that documents, can anybody in the organization send in a formal change request, or does it have to be like a department manager? So I used to be a CIO at a bank, and we controlled this very, very tightly. A branch manager could not come in and say, well, I need to make a change in our core banking system for my one teller. As much as that sounds like that's smart, unfortunately, the branch manager is not the person that really is qualified to be making that decision. So we would need to go to whoever's running teller operations and say, does this make sense for us to make this change? So you have to document who is the person or people that can be requesting changes. And generally speaking, it's usually whoever oversees that process. In a small organization, it might just be the boss, the CEO. In an organization of 30, 40 people, it might be 3 or 4 different people that can actually request a change. Okay, so you want to think through that. Now, the actual request for change, I'm going to show you an example at the end of this of what this can look like, but there needs to be some standardized processes of what you request. And I've got a big list of these. Just for time's sake, I'm not going to read over every single one of these. You can read them yourself. But the ticket itself, when you actually generate a change request ticket, it should have a bunch of fields, things like priorities, things like system that needs to be changed, affected user that needs that change, a description of the change. There's a lot of things that can go through on this. But that last one I want to point to is business justification is a big need here, right? Why are we wanting to make this change? Why is this necessary? Now, do you notice some of the things that are not in this request? Things like what's the risk of this change? Usually the person requesting the change is not the same person that should be assessing that change to say, well, can we do that? And what's the risk of it? What's the fallback plan? We're going to get to all of those things in a minute. But the requester is usually the business use case person that says, I need this change so that I can continue to do X, Y, and Z. Let me pause here. Alex, anything else you want to add into step 1?
I mean, my snarky comment was going to be, Wes, it's almost like technology is being driven by business needs and by business decisions, and that just seems weird and different.
Yeah.
And I'm only joking a little bit because too often we're too worried about, you must use my techie thing because it's my techie thing and I make $1 selling it. But at the end of the day, all business decisions really should be risk-based decisions and risk versus reward-based decisions. And that's what we're encouraging right here.
That's right. That's right. Okay, so let's jump into step 2. So now we have a reviewal process. So once that ticket hits in its flow, you do want to think through like ticket workflow. So if it's a ticket request for the RMM, it might go to someone that reviews it that's in charge of the RMM itself and is educated around it. If it's a request process for a line of business application, that might go to somebody different. So you want to think through the systems that can be changed. Who should those go to? Because you need to have an intelligent person that's reviewing and prioritizing the change according to that system. So again, a small MSP, it could just be one person, maybe the business owner, the CEO of the MSP themselves. It could be that. But you need to make sure who is the right person who is qualified to review these. So they're going to come in, they're going to take a look at this. As you see here, the request can be rejected or returned to the submitter if we don't have what we need. And that's okay. Remember, the process here is not to turn this into so much bureaucratic red tape that nothing gets done and we move at the speed of government. That's a failed change management process. If you do change management right, the chance of rejected changes, like when they're requested, should be very, very, very low. That's how you know you're doing this well. You should not have a heavily rejected number of tickets coming back. If that's the case, then you either have the wrong person submitting them, or you don't have enough documentation in the actual request itself to make those changes. Okay, so I want to say that the person reviewing that request, it should be a high degree, 80, 90, 95% of yeah, we don't need to kick back to you to get more information. So step 3 is really where we get a lot more into the depths of these things. Just because we don't kick it back doesn't mean that we approve it, right? So and I'm going to give you some examples. There's different priority levels that we're going to get into in a second. But step 3 is, as we're evaluating this, what we're thinking about, the decision maker is thinking about things like impact, risks. As Alex mentioned, what are the benefits to our organization by doing this? We have to think through all of this. And also, is this thing critical? Can this thing be pushed a week or 2 weeks because of things we have in place, or does it have to be done right this instant? And there could be reasons for that. We also want to think through, is this going to cause disruption? If it's going to cause disruption and it's not an emergency, then we probably want to make this change outside of business operating hours. If it's an absolute emergency and there's a fire burning down, maybe it's an incident, like an actual cybersecurity incident. Maybe we do that right now at the risk of outage, at the risk of impact. So you want to have those things that are documented. Also, let me just say this. Today's webinar is not about incident response, but I do just want to say something very quickly. Change management and incident response can butt heads together in some cases. An example would be if you have a live incident and you're trying to take care of that incident, and your change management, you get a request that comes in that says, like, reboot that machine and restore it to its working good order, and we're not sure the full scope of that incident, you could actually cause some real damage to an active crime scene because you've now forensically changed the image. So you need to make sure that change management should be subservient to incident response. Because if it's not, your change management could actually introduce problems when it comes to cybersecurity events. That should be rare, but I need to say that because you need to make sure that you put equal attention into your incident response as well, okay? Now, going back to evaluating the change. What we're trying to do here is understand the impact, understand how to prioritize it, and also try to impact, do we need to communicate this to other constituents? Do we need to make sure that we've really considered, oh, wait, they're requesting this, but before we can do that, we got to do this and this and this first. It gives us the chance to really evaluate what needs to happen before we just go and click a button and enable something, and then all hell breaks loose from there. Alex, did I miss anything?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So now we're at the approval stage. And this should be a little bit, once we've done the assessment, there can be, so what you're going to want to do, basically what that evaluation stage is going to be doing is we're going to be adding some material to the ticket. And I've got an example of one of these from an MSP of ours that sent us some examples that they gave us permission to share with you. But just keep in mind, you want to document all of those things from the evaluation. So you've got all that in place, and you understand now we're ready to say we can actually authoritatively make this change. As you see here, each change requires authorization from the appropriate authority level. And I'm going to kind of show you how that can work. Again, for a small MSP, very simple. The person that's approving, and it might also be the evaluator, right? It could be the same person. But keep in mind, for a larger MSP, step 3, that evaluation could be done by, let's say, a tier 3 help desk person that's qualified to think through the impact and the changes. And then they submit all of that to somebody higher up to say, you make the judgment call. If we do this, we got to do this and this and this and this. Are you okay with that? If we do this, we got to communicate that. Are you ready? So in some cases, you want a difference between the evaluator and the approver. But in small MSPs, very commonly, it can be the same person. So I just want to say all of that. You just need to think through who those roles are in the organization. Anything else you want to add to that, Alex?
Yeah, I think just be careful in your small organizations, right? My big example of this is it was too easy as the approver and the evaluator to skip a step. And if you're not careful, if you don't make sure that you follow your own process, right? These are set up to set you up for success, not for failure. So make sure that if you're wearing multiple hats in this, you slow down, take the extra 10 seconds to go through the entire process. You'll just wind up in a safer, better place. And it's always the case in the small MSP. We just end up wearing too many hats, and we have to be a little bit extra careful because of it. And I think it's worth saying that.
Yeah. All right, so now we're ready to implement the change. So now the approver has come through. They said, I've taken into evaluation what the evaluator said. I have decided, yes, we're going to approve it. Now we push through as part of the change begins to happen, right? And so at this point, this could actually get kicked back to somebody lower in the organization. I don't mean lower in importance. I just mean someone in the org chart that's actually a little like maybe a help desk tier 3 person or tier 2 person. Somebody that actually has the administrative ability to enforce and enact changes. Okay, so at this point, it's been approved, so the flow of the ticket can go to that person. Let's say it's an RMM. Whoever actually handles the RMM itself says, okay, cool, now I'm going to make this change. I'm going to add this script. I'm going to add this user. I'm going to change this permission. It's somebody that, from a technical perspective, has the knowledge and authority to make that change. And to me, let me say this. It's the way you make change management work really well is you make sure that this person has a gatekeeper mentality to them. What would happen oftentimes, this is just a wisdom from Wes perspective. If you've never done change management and the person that's responsible for implementing changes is used to doing everything themselves, the danger comes in when someone gives them a phone call, someone sends them an email, hey, Sarah, can you add this one thing real quick? And they're used to, yeah, just 1 second, click, done, good. You need to teach them, you got to be a gatekeeper. So you got to say, oh, absolutely, I can get that set for you, Steve, but can you put a ticket in? Here's the web address to go or whatever. I need you to put a ticket in for this system. We're not trying to add red tape. We're at a stage now where we got to make sure that everything we do is documented because my job's on the line just like yours. And it's more than just that. We just want to make sure we're doing it the right way. We just want to make sure everything's been documented. It's important from a process perspective and a security perspective. Oh, okay, I'll go do that. So you really need this person to be that gatekeeper because let's be real. If they're not a gatekeeper, they can literally sandbag this entire process because they're the ones that make the change. So at my bank, I would always have this conversation with my people that could make the changes. I'd say, you're like the most important part of this process because anyone can sidestep everything and we'll have no idea. So it's so important that you're the gatekeeper. It's so important that you are the person that just makes sure if you get those one-off requests that you forward it to me if you have to. But I need you to make sure that you stop and don't let those changes happen until it's gone through its process. Does that make sense, Alex? Any questions on this?
Well, just to that point, understand that person's probably going to get some pushback, and if it's not you or not someone in a ton of authority, you may have to have their back with some customers who are demanding a change right now, yesterday, right? And so just understand that as the owner, that person, to Wes's point, they need to feel supported, and as the owner or as the manager, you need to make sure they are supported. This is a process that keeps your business, your MSP, out of hot water sometimes. So make sure we support the people that do it, and to Wes's point, make sure they feel supported.
Thanks. Good stuff. Real good stuff. Let's pause here for a second. Let me get some feedback from the audience. Give me a thumbs up or a yes in chat if you're following along, if this is making sense, if this is all clicking with you, or use this as a chance to ask us a question to say, Wes, you confused me here, or what do you do about X, Y, and Z? I want to get some feedback from y'all.
Dory makes a great point. She said some of the best techs tend to be some of the most challenged at following the change management process. And that goes back to the guy who's just, oh yeah, click, I can make that happen. And sometimes that means that the owner isn't the right person to be running the change management process. Sometimes you need to take yourself out of it if you find that you have that, I got to solve everybody's problem for them right now because I'm the owner and I've been doing this my whole life. This is why I'm in the business, right? Sometimes it may mean you've got to put somebody else in that role and say, hey, I need you to stop me and be my speed bump. And again, that's about empowering your people. But fight your own biases at this.
Yep. It's good stuff. We have one liar in the chat. That's Dr. Keith. Keith Nelson's a really good friend of ours. He's joined. You are not too old or getting too confused. You could literally be teaching this yourself, my friend. It's good to see you on, Keith Nelson. It's so good to see you. But good. We're getting thumbs up from folks. So we're going to move forward. And I promise we're going to get kind of practical at this in just a minute. So next, this is like the last step, right? We want to make sure that we've implemented the change. We've followed what the ticket has said. We've done this correctly according to what the plan was that we created and documented in the system. But we also at some point, we need to do a review to make sure of this, because here's what happens. Remember we said human error comes in place. Sometimes we click on one too many things. Sometimes we thought we did something correct, but we just missed something. These things happen all the time. Humans make mistakes. And as much as we want to automate all of the things that we do, that's just never going to truly fully happen. There's always going to be things that require some amount of human interaction. And so reviewing the change is a really important part of all of this. And it's just important to make sure we have documentation behind all of this, because you know what? When we come back and we look at something, we may in the review process be like, oh, whoops, you know what? We didn't actually assess before we could do this. Let's make something up. Like before we could add this user to the VPN system, we realized we didn't have a license for it. So now we need to add a process change to say when a new VPN request comes in, we also need to, before we enact it, we need to review licensing and make sure we have a license available for it. That's just making that up, right? So the review stage is not just additional bureaucracy. It actually helps push your organization into better efficiency to say, oh, now we know we're going to make this change to our process for this type of change so that we don't make that mistake again. Or maybe you made a change that caused an outage to something, and now you understand why that happened as part of the review process. You can go and put that into your systems documentation so that, again, you're ready for it, right? But you also, last step, you want to check with the end user and make sure everything is working out according to plan and things seem to be working out well. Any other comments on reviewing the change, Alex?
Yeah, I want to point out some really glaring things here that could keep us out of trouble. Imagine if someone at the Colonial Pipeline had done a review of the change and just pinged that remote access system to make sure it was offline before they closed the work order. And this happens in MSPs all the time. If your inventories are incorrect, what's happened? Well, we've retired a piece of equipment we didn't tell somebody about, or we've retired a piece of equipment, didn't properly pull it out of all of our inventory systems. So we made a change that nobody went back and checked. And some of your ticketing systems, I know ConnectWise did this because we did it at my MSP, will allow you to do what's called a two-step ticket close. And the two-step close allows one person to mark it completed, but not closed. A second person to come along, review the ticket, and move it into a closed status. I think that's an incredibly valuable tool you can use at your MSP, especially on a change management board, to say, we require two-step close. One person's going to do the work, another person's going to go just quickly verify that the changes were documented, everything looks right, and that they're signing off on the work too, is saying, yep, done, we're in a good place. It's a way to really keep ourselves out of trouble here with the tools that you already have.
Love that. I would love to know from the audience, how many of you use, give me a yes or no, how many of you use and have standardized that two ticket or that two process for their ticket close, two-step process? I'd love to know. Give me a yes or no in chat. My hunch is that most MSPs, probably don't use it. And I can understand why the answer might be no, because you'd say, well, that adds in more process and someone's got to go look over it. But, it could be a really powerful way just to, again, eliminate change. Also, I want to pull out what Ben just said. What a great comment is, rollbacks, right? What happens when things don't go the way we wanted them and expected them to go? And now we're in a stage in which we got to pull this back. Good documentation lets us see that. Good documentation lets us understand, as part of the review stage, how to do that. Let's take a page from healthcare for a minute. When you go and see a doctor, those nurses are documenting every tiny little thing, down to the diagnosis, down to the type of medicine they give you, the types of diagnostics, all the test results that come back. Like, they can literally trace your health journey all the way back to the very beginning if they've done it right, because they know they need to in this age of lawsuits, in this age of medical practice, just requiring it to make sure that we are treating this patient correctly and we didn't actually give them a double dosage of like some kind of, super dangerous drug. Like, they track all of this because it's really important. It's not just red tape, it's process that lets us reverse the clock, see what happened, and really put this in place in the right way. So good stuff. Anything from we got a lot of chat coming in. I love this. Anything you want to pull out here, Alex, that we want to chat about?
No, I think we're good. Just a couple of folks saying, they use two-step close for other things, like making sure that their tickets get closed correctly and things like that. But some positive stuff there. Nothing super important to bold at the top.
Awesome. So one thing you can do as well, and we would do this in my bank at least twice a year, we would do what we call user access reviews. And this is very laborious, unfortunately, but it is important. And if you ever go for a SOC 2, congrats, you're just going to have to start doing this, is actually doing periodic user access reviews. And you actually go through and you see, do things match up? Do what their role type is that's defined as their role type, does it match up to the level of user privileges that are in place? And here's the way that, let me just kind of give you a picture into how a SOC 2, especially a type 2 works, where they kind of are reviewing a whole period of time. Let's say it's a 6-month period of time. That auditor is going to come in and they're going to say, all right, give me for the month of February, give me all of your tickets that came in for change requests. And they're going to give you all, and they're going to look through them. They're going to pick one, and they're going to pick, let's say, a VPN change request. And they're going to say, cool, there it is. Let's go track this. Show me the ticket where this was built from. Show me the logs from the VPN system, and I want to see if this all matches up. And then show me your actual current access control. And they're actually going to spot check 3 or 4 of them and see, does your permissions match what was requested? This is called user access review. You can do these internally. They're very helpful to find gotchas and issues and accidents and misconfigurations that can lead to big deal issues. But you'll also find that auditors, as the SOC 2 process, are going to do that. And you can't hide from the auditors because they're the ones that are going to go pick these things at random. So you have to be ready for these things, if that makes sense.
And Bob points out that even some of these processes need to get reviewed regularly, right? As we start to talk about audit requirements and things like that, your change control process needs to get reviewed regularly to make sure that it still is reflective of how you run the business. So make sure you don't put this thing on a shelf and forget about it once you document it. This is a forever thing.
Yep. All right, so another thing we can do as part of this process is we can really start thinking through what kinds of changes are being requested. And you can actually have the very beginning, back to stage 1, you can have a change requester do these things. You can actually have these as defined categories, and you don't have to follow these exactly. You can have your own words for this, or you might mishmash 2 of these into one or whatever. You might add new categories. But you do want to think through, like, what are the kinds of changes that we may have and that we may want to use? So you may have, for example, anticipated changes. These are things that we knew were going to happen, we're prepared for. An example of this would be a rollout and a decommissioning of Microsoft Exchange to move to Microsoft 365. We knew it was coming. We documented it. It was in our roadmap. We had it budgeted, and we knew this was coming up on January 14th, right? You can do those things. And you really want to have a healthy number of anticipated changes coming in. The reality is you will never have 100% of all changes coming in being anticipated, never. But it's nice to have a good high percentage. And you want to track that in your user access kind of oversight. You really want to see how many of these came in from anticipated. The next one is reactive, and reactive ones happen, right? They're just sort of, this thing happened and we weren't prepared for it. It could be anything from, for example, my browser that has the red update right now that all of you see, right? That's a reactive change. I didn't know that Brave was going to come out with an update that I need to go and update it. I haven't used this laptop in 2 days, but I'm traveling today, so I got my laptop out. It's time for me to update it, right? That's a reactive change, and those things happen. The next series is incremental, right? So this could be a series of changes that get pushed together because of a bigger, let's say a big project. And I gave you an example of a cloud migration. So incremental might be, we actually have to have this change, this change, this change, this change. And actually they could be anticipated changes and incremental, but they're incremental because we've taken a bigger project and we've sliced it up into smaller chunks so that we can get through this in a very process-driven way. And then the last one is just strategic, right? So these can be changes that are made at a higher level. And so, for example, let's say that our MSP is acquiring a new MSP. So these could be strategic changes that we are going to have happen that, they're not because we hired a new user, we need to make a change to a system because we need to, update it and patch it or whatever. It's because we're doing things at a strategic level at the organization. So we need to think through, how do we merge these 2 Active Directory forests into one? I'm just throwing something out there, right? Or we're decommissioning one vendor and moving to another one. These are strategic changes that need to be sort of tracked in that category. But these are the overall categories. I'm curious to know from chat, do you guys have other categories? Do these work well for you? Those that are doing change management, I'd love to hear how you kind of approach these. We'll pull out some quotes from y'all if you do have some examples from that. Alex, anything else?
While they're building that out, you mentioned that anticipated versus reactive, we should be leaning towards more anticipated changes, right? So that we're not always operating with what little hair we have on fire. Do you have some idea for the folks in the chat? And I know it's not 100%, we can't be exact, but what does a healthy ratio look like? Is it half anticipated, half reactive? Is it 75-25? What does healthy look like?
Yeah, great question. For us, I think it is different for everybody, right? But I think for us at our bank, A healthy degree was somewhere around, we like to see somewhere between 60 and 70% being anticipated changes. And then that can change, of course, if we have any kind of major large projects that are occurring, and then you'll see some of the incrementals really come into play. And in fact, it could be almost a huge degree of incremental changes that come in if it's a big changeover. You know, like we switched to a new
which is
voice
healthy,
over IP
right?
system.
Yeah, this is healthy because it means we're planning ahead and we're not running around always in reactive mode and playing catch up.
And you can look at your, so here's an example of how you can actually make your MSP better. Let's say you notice that you have, 60% of reactive changes are are HR related, from new hires, fires, that kind of stuff. You're like, wait a second, those should be anticipated. That means that we probably need to have a better process between us and HR so that we can actually go back and say, let's not only cut these out of being reactive, let's make sure we have a good process in place with HR to know, oh, these new employees are being hired in. We have a process between them from the new hire perspective to us to making sure we're making these changes, and we actually push those into anticipated. So that reactive category should be heavily watched by your MSP to say, why are these so reactive, and are there process control changes that we can make to the organization to push it into more anticipated? And guys, that's how your MSP makes more money. That's how you increase the margin.
And we know Bob is a mature dialed in MSP, and he's chiming in telling us he's at about 90-10. So way more anticipated changes. He's communicating with his customers. He's got process in place, and that's what maturity and that's what healthy looks like. So good to know.
Yeah, that's right. Great stuff. Okay, so there should also be priorities. The reality is we have to understand that bleep is going to happen, right? And we have to be prepared for the bleep. But the idea is we shouldn't have too much of that happening. We should be ready. So first of all, there is an emergency category. And remember what we said before about emergency. Make sure that you salt your emergency with incident response. Because if you make changes, let me just say it again, if you make changes because it's an emergency and it's also a high-level security incident, you could cause yourself all kinds of problems. You could potentially have cyber insurance would invalidate a claim. You could have potential legal processes that are damaged because forensic evidence is gone. So emergency, it's fine if it's an emergency because it's a major outage and nothing is working and you're pushing something in. It's the only thing that matters, right? To respond to a major incident. Just know that cybersecurity incidents need to have the governance of incident response on top. That's beyond today's webinar. If you guys are interested in an incident response webinar, we could do one of those too at some point. But emergency should happen rarely, but it's high priority. The next one that should be very common is standard one. It occurs frequently, it's low risk. It has this pre-established procedure. We know what we're doing here. Now the question is, how do you know it's low risk? The question is, how are you sure of that? Well, this is where, remember we said the review process, once the ticket comes in from the approver, when we review it, this is that stage where we say, yeah, this is definitely standard. Now, it's okay for your change requester to choose this is emergency or choose that this is standard, but whoever's reviewing it should assess that, make sure. An example could be, you may have a change, a requester for an organizational head that everything is a fire for them. And if their one little thing is out and it's not working, all hell is breaking loose and it's red alarm. And in reality to the org, we're fine. Come on. So they may put something in as an emergency because it's an emergency to them, but it's standard to the organization. Okay, so
I feel like when you say that,
just make sure you're
I feel like when you say that, everybody in the room has an image of a person who comes into their mind. It's like, oh, that customer. Yeah, I know exactly who Wes is talking about.
That's Greg. Yep, that's what Greg does.
Right.
Exactly
Mine's name was Mike.
We all have a Greg.
Yep.
Yes. Now this may throw you for a loop. Why is normal at number 4? I'll get to that. But number 3 is major, right? So major is not an emergency, but it has significant implications to us, right? It could be significantly financially risky or financially expensive if it's a big major, let's say, upgrade to a system, or it is major because it's going to take a lot of work and there's going to be a lot of incremental tickets that come in to make sure this, it's not just a one click and the change goes off. There's a bunch of stuff that goes into this. So those are things that could be those are ones that are really going to say, because this priority is a major change, there's a lot more that has to happen. We might even have to have this go to what's called a change control board, a committee of people that are going to discuss this and plan it and roll it out. And it's not going to be a decision made today or tomorrow. It may be a full week of work and planning. It could be a lot more than that. But just make sure you have a category for major, because major is going to force you to do more things than just the normal standard change. Okay, so now normal. Well, it looks like a stepchild. Why is this one hanging out here? Why is it? Well, here's what normal is. It's neither standard nor emergency, but it's still important. So this kind of can be a catch-all category that's like, wait a second, we don't normally do this. It's not critically important. It's not major to us. But we don't normally make a change like this. So it just, this is a normal change. It's normal in the sense that it's not like going to wreck our company if we miss it, but it's also something we don't standardly, it's not a standard thing for us. So we probably want to review this a little bit more and just make sure we're tucking things up and really checking this one, because it's not in our normal wheelhouse, right? You're asking us to do something we don't normally do, so let's make sure we don't make a mistake. That's why I added this normal category. You might call it something different, but I have that category too, because that can occur and does occur. Any thoughts or questions from the audience, or thoughts from you, Alex?
My one big takeaway from this as we were building this out is that only one of these 4 categories is really time sensitive. While others might be time bound, only one says, hey, we got to go run and do this right now. And I think that's important to make sure that we're not putting everything in as an emergency, to allow for proper planning, and to make sure that when we do these in an emergency, we still slide in some proper planning.
That's right. That's right. Okay.
Where do you think?
Yeah,
this is a great question. Where do you think an escalation of privileges should fall?
So, in my thought, it can be the reviewer. It can also be the approver. The reviewer may be qualified to say, "Oh man, this is definitely a major change." You just said it was a normal or standard change, right? So it's okay with the person placing it in, giving it a priority. But you can have multiple people that may change that priority. So it could be the reviewer, it could be the approver. The approver could come in and say, guys, this is actually a major change. We're not ready to do this yet, and here's why. So there could be multiple places where that could be changed before it gets to the implementation. There could be multiple folks that do that. So it's a great question.
And I think a lot of that depends on the scope of the escalation of privilege, right? If I'm giving somebody access to one minor system and more privileges in it, that's way different than if I'm giving a whole group of people admin credentials or majorly elevated privileges on multiple systems.
That's right. That's right. Okay,
so scope has something to do with that.
We are getting close to the edge of time here, so I want to make sure that we get to a couple last kind of practical things here. So why should you care? I think we've pretty much talked about this. If you don't do it, here's why most people don't do it. Well, it's easy and quick to not do it. Right? You tell me you want me to go the hard way. There's a Dilbert cartoon I saw a while back. Like, we're thinking about implementing like full IT change management. We're going to hire this guy that's going to handle all this for us, and blah, blah, blah. And the guy's like, why don't you just implement a true change management system instead of trying to hire this out and have someone, whatever. And he's like, well, that sounds harder. Right? And sometimes you do have to go the hard route first, and then things get easier. So I kind of gave you the cleaning the house analogy, right? But when you don't clean your house, things go down south really quick, right? Things don't get good. I live in Florida. Roaches are going to get everywhere. You really don't need that to happen. How do you know your floor is rotting out? This is the same idea. If you don't care about this, it's going to lead to bad outcomes for you. All right. Also, why you should care. I mean, it's pretty obvious. We've covered a lot of these things, right? We're talking about reduction of risks, making sure we've assessed changes to systems. It helps us look like professionals, right? When we have a full back history of all these things, and we can go back and find out how it happened, why it happened, it just really makes us look a lot better. I'm not saying that it's going to help you like in litigation. I mean, it would, but I am saying it shouldn't come to that. The point is, we should look like professionals. If we want people to treat us this way, we should be doing some of these things. It can reduce liability, but really, I love this last part, right? It allows us to see everything that's happened and roll back the clock. So if we realize, this didn't work well, what are all the changes that we did? And how do we get back to that other state so that we can go reassess? That happens sometimes, guys. We all know it. So being able to have that rollback is a really powerful capability. So how do we get better at this as we kind of close and kind of finish this thing up? And by the way, please queue us up with questions if you have any. First of all, we really do want to focus to be as low friction as possible. Steal Bob's quote right here. If anyone thinks this is too much bureaucracy, they haven't kept track of the time it takes to clean up messes. That's probably the best statement of all. Like, Bob could have just come in and given that quote. We could have walked away as the big motivator, right? That's exactly right. The cost of inaction is going to make you look way worse, right? So we do want it to be low friction, but there's going to be some, especially as you're building this out. But, it's important, and it gives us a good ledger of what we've changed. We talked about rolling the clock back. And then also a sliding scale approach is okay, right? The way that you do this as a small MSP is going to be both easier and simpler than a larger MSP, because the reviewer might also be the approver in those cases. In a super small MSP, the reviewer might be the approver, might be the implementer. Now, you don't want that to happen once you're past 3, 4, 5 employees. You got to start putting some separations of duty in place. But just know that you don't have to do this the way Bank of America does. You don't have to do this the way Global Data Systems does it. I don't forget how many employees you guys are, Bob, but you're quite a few. You don't have to go full in on that. You can implement and get yourself to success. 130, yeah. So you're probably, if you're starting this today, you're probably not going to have the maturity that Bob's had, but that's okay. Small steps to this is what makes this thing work. Also, let's talk about monitoring for unplanned change. The reality is that you're never going to do this perfectly. There's always going to be risks. By the way, this is why Liongard is awesome, because Liongard is really, really good at this. At some point, you must have a tool that is going to help you see this, implement it, that make this smoother for you, and get in front of things that you missed. We're just humans here. We're going to fail. We're going to have issues. And so not having a tool like Liongard in place is going to make that much more difficult. And this is why it becomes important for you. And this is where I'm just going to throw this out there. I don't work for Liongard, right? But I can tell you this is what they do. And they have a way to alert when these things are going to happen. And they can help you reconcile between your change management system and what's actually in place. And those checks and balances are really, really important to finding the big uh-ohs. Because I'm telling you, I think every study shows you 80% of all security incidents, maybe more, there's some kind of misconfiguration, or there's privilege abuse, or there's something that happened that's because we've made changes to systems and haven't properly assessed and documented the risk, okay? We've also talked about recovering from changes. I'm just going to kind of skip by this because we've talked about it a lot. And then I wanted to give you an example of how ETOP does this. So ETOP gave me some examples of this. This is kind of how theirs look. And notice they may not have all the exact same things that we talked about. Notice in some of these cases, they're very simple. Just you see downtime required over there on the right. They just put not required. So you don't feel like every possible thing that you have to do is have to be like a book written on it. It can be some very simple things. But I love how ETOP has approached this. It's very, very simple. It's very, very clean and clear. And I think this is a great way for you to get started. You can literally go steal some of this and begin the process. And I hope you look at this and be like, oh, okay, now I have the knowledge. Now I see an example of this. I can get going on this. Alex, don't you think?
Yeah, and just remember, done is better than perfect, right? Having a change management process in place that you can iterate on and improve over time is way better than saying, this looks too big, I can't bite off this whole thing, I'm just not going to do it.
I know we've had a lot of discussion and Q&A throughout, but if there are additional questions throughout this, please chime in. Garnet saying, I'm convinced about change management. I'm interested in learning more about automating change audits and implementing a workflow for review. That's awesome. I think the Liongard team would love to chat with you about that, because that's literally in their wheelhouse. And so you definitely want to ping them, or they'll ping you back and get in on this. One thing we want to let you know.
They couldn't have paid anybody to make a better statement to wrap this up, but and I'm pretty sure they didn't. But you just never know. If you did, well done, Vin.
I'm sure they did not.
Right,
Dory, thank you. Last thing we want to let you all know, the Empath folks, we are doing an awesome event next week. It's called Rejection Con. Go check it out. It's rejectioncon.com. I want you to go there. Literally 100% of proceeds to that goes to a charity. It goes to the Rural Tech Fund. We have some awesome talks. And the whole idea is people that have had really great talks and ideas for sessions that got rejected from a bigger conference. We're giving people a voice to share their stories. And there's some incredible sessions, folks. It's rejectioncon.com. It's a pay what you can model. So even if you want to come in completely for free, that's okay. But I'm asking you, if you're an MSP and you're making good money, go donate. It literally goes to a 501c3. It's a tax write-off. I want to see you there, rejectioncon.com. It's going to be really, really, really cool. And it's coming up next week. Lastly, we've got a little QR code for you if you guys want to scan this, and if you want to see more about what we're doing from Empath perspective, as far as learning more about who we are and how we train and educate and help people. That's basically what we did today. Got a QR code for you there, and we'll have that for you later. I want to kind of move past all of this so we can get there. So last 2 seconds of leaving that up in case anyone wanted to scan that. And I'm going to flip it back over to Laura and our friends at Dell.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Ball. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Alex and Wes, for giving us such a good webinar here on change management. I just wanted to speak briefly on the Dell Expert Network. If you're not aware, the Dell Expert Network is a referrals and incentives program that is designed for MSPs who are services focused and are not reselling Dell hardware. So some of you might be a part of the Dell Partner Program that is designed specifically for people who are reselling the Dell hardware. The Dell Expert Network are for those of you who are not doing any reselling. So just going to put that out there again. A couple key benefits of the program: you get a dedicated account manager. And then one of the biggest ones is that you're going to get 3% back in Dell rewards whenever your clients make a purchase, whenever you refer them to purchase from Dell. So if you are interested in learning more about the program, you can visit our webpage there, or feel free to send me an email, laura_ball@dell.com. Happy to talk more about it and see if it's a good fit for you and your business. Another big thing too is the Tech Direct. So, we're talking about change management, but with Tech Direct, you can go in and you can self-log support tickets for your clients. So save that time from having to call into Dell support. Yeah, so thanks again for joining. And like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. Dell is
Thank you, Laura.
and thank you for helping us get this thing going. Vin and team, thank you for hosting us, and we'll let you guys take over from here.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Thanks for us, and thank you, Laura. Yeah, if you all feel like today's content was valuable, please let us know. And I believe that Alex and Wes are going to stay a little bit longer to answer some and loop back on some of the questions that are in Q&A. So really appreciate y'all's interaction and sharing with us with your thoughts. Definitely continue to share your feedback with us privately, or if you want to comment on LinkedIn, please feel free. We'd love to hear from you. Liongard is sponsoring a couple of events in right now with our holidays event with the channel program. So go there. There's a bunch of toys and cool tech giveaways that they're doing as well. And we also want to do a shout out for Rejection Con, because we're sponsoring that, and we believe that is such a great cause and where it's going. So again, we recommend that you watch the video and share that with your teammates. That'll really help us spread the word around change management and how it is so important towards securing yourselves, protecting yourselves and your customers. With that, I want to thank Alex and Wes again. And if you're interested in upskilling your MSP team, definitely visit them at empath, msp.com. And thank you again, Laura, for the shout out from Dell Expert Network. All right.